This episode of the Game Biz is brought to you by Netflix. For a free 30-day trial, head on over to netflix.com/GamebreakerTV. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Game Biz episode number 8 for September 10th, 2013. I'm Gary Gannon. You're watching Gamebreaker TV, and joining me, as always, on the Game Biz to talk about the business of video games is the one, the only Mr. Monty Sharma. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Gary. How about you?
Great. Hey, we got fantastic comments about the episode last week. Great comments. So people love the interviews and the inside look from people. If you guys can check it out, interview about 20-minute interview.
Yeah, 18 minutes.
Craig 18 minutes from Turbine. Great interview. Got a lot of great comments, so go check that out. Today's show, I want to start today's show off. We got an email this last week that you had sent over to me. That was pretty amazing, and it kind of encapsulates, I think, like why this show even exists. I won't read off who it is. I guess he probably doesn't care, but I'll just I'm going to read through it here really quick because I think it's pretty important. It says, "Hey Monty, I want to tell you a story about how your show influenced me over the last year. I'm a successful software development manager working for a large corporation. Although it is a lot of fun, it really is not my passion. See, I have always dreamed about making video games. It's the reason why I learned how to program computers. Although I have tried to hack around with various gaming side projects, I was never really successful, and so I continued to write business software. At some point in 2012, I watched your Monty's Minute show where you mentioned the indie game scene and Unity 3D, which is a platform we talk about here a lot on the show. He says, I was intrigued and I downloaded the free version of Unity to play with. I immediately recognized how powerful the tool was and how easily you could make multi-platform 3D games using it. After a few failed projects, I decided I finally had something good. He said, see, my 18-month-old son was very much into trains, and I wrote him a small train simulator that would allow him to control a train as it went along the track. Seeing how happy it made him, I thought that other parents might like it, and I released the game for the Android platform. He said things quickly got out of hand. Train Sim was released on December 21st, 2012. And by January 21st, 2012, had over 700,000 downloads. Wow. He says, I realized I had something great and monetized the app through AdMob. Thanks to Unity's multi-platform support, I published the game for iOS and Windows 8 as well. Almost a year later, Train Sim makes more money than my full-time job, and it all started with Monty's Minute. So kudos to you, sir. Good job. Thanks for doing these. He says, thanks for doing the show. I'm sure there are more indie developers out there just like me who got inspired by the gaming industry from you. Please continue to encourage people to make games. Let them know they don't have to quit their jobs, get VC funding, or sell their house to do it. It just takes a lot of hard work and one good idea. So there you go.
You know, and that's absolutely true. So I got Train Sim, and when my son was that age, he would walk around with, a train in each hand. He had his Thomas the Tank Engine set. And that's how he went. And there was, he used to watch a video, which was just trains driving. And he'd watch it. No plot, no nothing. He'd watch it, he'd rewind it, he'd watch it again. And, Train Sim does that. And so what he took was a really simple idea. He did not try and build an MMO, did not try and build, the latest, greatest RTS. Here's a simple idea. Let me try it out, see what I can do.
Train going down a track. It's probably got some very simple controls like speed, brake.
Speed. You can look inside. You can change the cars. And so he's not an artist. He got a bunch of assets from other places. But that's what it takes. And, the main reason I wanted to do this show was to save people from boring jobs. So, we'll chalk one up there.
There you go. Good for you. Chalk one up for the Monty's Minute, now the Game Biz. All right, so let's start it off this week. This one from Harvey. He says, I'm a fan of your show with Gary Gannon on Gamebreaker TV. I've taken your advice and just started making a game. In particular, making a physical prototype to test the mechanics. He says, in my case, this was a part of its natural development as my game is akin to Hearthstone. in that it uses card-based gameplay. Our difference is the introduction of a procedurally generated board that, despite being random, provides consistent elements and remains balanced for both players. It says, so far we have the aforementioned physical prototype, concept art, and developing lore behind the game. We are actively looking for a third co-founder to lead the programming, but expect outsourcing might have to be the way forward. I was wondering if you could discuss what you would consider are the priorities for me to nail down, and whether accelerators would be a good option. First of all, explain to people out there who might not know what accelerators are.
Yeah, so back, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, people used to create incubators. And this would be a place for a small business to start. They give you some help. Maybe there's some money. There's some shared, photocopier, meeting room, that sort of thing. Most of them failed miserably. As soon as the money that was funding them dried up, they just tanked. What started to happen is this concept of an accelerator, which oftentimes is a competition to get into. So you have to be, one of the best companies. I mentor at one called Mass Challenge. They accept 100 applicants out of 1,200 initial applications. So, it's fairly intense to get in. And then once you're in, they give you some business support. They connect you with mentors, and the angle is really get something built that proves your idea is right, and then turn around and either raise some money to do it or go to market and keep going. And that's the latest thing with accelerators. They're quite hot right now.
So what do you think? What do you think where he's at in his development cycle here, or is starting up? What do you think some of his priorities he should consider right now?
I think he's done absolutely the right thing in building that physical prototype. So this is the second one where when I saw the idea, I said, "Oh, yeah, interesting idea, but you don't know if it's actually fun." And you can build it on paper, go ahead and do that. And so essentially what it sounds like is it's a game like Hearthstone, but the board gets generated kind of like the Catan board where it's different every time. And that sounds neat. The big issue for the game is going to be, is it fun? Is it replayable? And so what I would actually encourage him to do is spend a little bit of time and build a nice physical prototype. So, have your artist do the artwork, print up the rules nicely, make a few sets of it, and go to your local game store. Locally we got the Wiz, and you go there and you can buy nothing. You can stand around and watch people play everything from Warhammer to Magic. You can show up with your own game and lay it out and say, hey, I built this, would love if you guys would try it out. That sort of feedback will really tell you a lot about your game, and it'll help you get your balance right. It'll help you get a good sense of, is it fun, is it not fun? Last game I encouraged to go this way, they've gone through, I'm going to say 4 or 5 major iterations of what they built, and that game is getting really good. And people are actually willing.
Would you suggest when they go to and they do something like that, they go down to their game shop and they have a bunch of people play the game? Would you bring almost maybe somebody a third party person to do the observation and maybe take notes and kind of get the questions? Do you think sometimes possibly that the people behind so close to the game are maybe too close and don't want to accept some of the criticisms and feedback that they're actually receiving from players?
Yeah, if you've got that kind of money, or somebody who's unbiased, that's a great way. But the other thing is to build yourself some internal metrics and say, hey, if somebody plays the game and when they finish, they want to play again, that's good. How many times will they replay this game? What's their feedback? What did they find was unbalanced, weak, slow? What's the pace of the game? So if it's Hearthstone, that's a quick-paced game. So are they hitting that sort of pace, or are people, standing around started playing some War Machine, and it's a fun game and all that, but boy, sometimes it takes 20 minutes to figure out the rule that has to apply. And that's not that's not what you want in this sort of a game. As you get that, then you can start to figure on what's going to translate well electronically. So these other guys who did this game is called Project Aegis, and once they're up public, I'll link to them. They're on Facebook. But they they have these really nice looking physical tokens. I bought them. Other people willing to put up money. They're actually going to do a Kickstarter where, first off, before we even built the digital version, here's a pen and paper one. Here's a physical one you can have. So that sort of thing takes you a long, long way, because once you have that programmer, every minute counts, and you want them to really drive through and make it work. Now, some of the things that you figure out on a physical prototype don't translate well to electronic. You're going to have to make some adjustments, but that takes you longer. So don't jump too fast from physical to electronic would be one thing. The other thing is as you go to these, local game events, things like that, just being in places where geeks hang out, they all want to play, they all want to see. The better sense you have of that, the better sense you're going to be able to build. But a lot of geeks can code. And you might find somebody who says, wow, I love this game. This is great. What are you planning to do with it? Well, we've got all this stuff, and we're looking to find a partner to do the coding. Well, gee, how hard could that be? Let me take a look. You might actually find a co-founder that way. And in that way, you've got somebody who actually cares about it the same way you do. Like if you outsource it, you have to be really, really certain that you've got everything nailed down, because the people receiving the outsourcing, they're not playing games. They haven't spent a ton of time on this. They're programmers, right? They're there to get paid, and they won't deliver the same quality somebody who cares about it will.
And that's just something to look into. So I'm almost positive. Hearthstone is actually in Unity as well. That's coded in Unity. So you should definitely look at that platform as well to build something like that, to get you started. So, all right.
And
so
even if they're weak coders, try Unity, see what they can do.
All right, next up, this one in from JagerB158 says, that was a great interview with Jay from Turbine. He got into some great details of the biz, thanks. But one question with all he told us, why couldn't he say how many QA testers they have? Seems strange with everything else he was willing to say. Was he holding that back for some reason?
You know what it probably was is he works for a large corporation, and typically everything they say has to be vetted by PR. And so the stuff that he talks about in terms of employment, QA, all that stuff, he does that regularly. I mean, I've had him do that talk for me half dozen times. When it comes to something like a number, any sort of a number, PR will beat into your head, don't say numbers. And sometimes it's for a good reason, because you can, reverse engineer more information.
Yep.
It could be something like, hey, if you put out, we have this many QA testers, then the backlash is oh, this bug was there because you
don't have enough. Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
And that's really not the case most times. Is it's not lack of testers that do it. So that's probably why.
All right, next up, from Lucas Mages. He says, first of all, thanks for all the guys and work you put into the show. Thank you so much for watching. He says, to my question, it is related to a question that got answered on episode 6 about MMO launches. It says, why do companies not use cloud computing to outsource their servers, or at least some parts of the server, into the cloud, where ordering new capacity on a moment-to-moment basis is not much of a problem? I am looking forward to hearing your opinions on that, and thanks for taking the time to answer the question. Thanks. Keep up the good work. I have a feeling your answer is going to be very close to why Gamebreaker can't even really fully use cloud. Like, we partially do, but
yeah. Well, there's two parts to this question, right? One part is full cloud infrastructure for what you're doing when you've got a large number of servers is actually more expensive than running your own servers, because you need your own ops team. It's nice to have hands-on iron, all those sorts of things. I mean, look, the prices have come way down. but it's still more expensive to do some of this stuff in the cloud if you have your own operations team, which all these major game developers do. They've got ops guys who know how to do it. They've got internal tools. They've got systems that they like to use. So that's one drawback. The other thing is if you look at it and you say, okay, let's put, we expect, I don't know, 1 million people starting. So we're going to put the facilities for 800,000 in our data center, and we're going to put the rest into some cloud servers, either Internap's Agile Cloud, Amazon's Web Services, whatever. And we'll scale dynamically. And, look, I use Internap's Agile Cloud all the time. It's ridiculously simple and elegant. I pop open a web page, and I fire up a server. And about a minute later, we've got access to a server with however many cores we need and the storage space to go with it. That's awesome. But if I'm running a game, the servers that I'm getting in a cloud are very often virtualized. And what that means is I'm not accessing, let's say I'm using 8 cores. I may not be using the same 8 cores on a single machine. That might be spread out between multiple machines. I may do something with 2 servers that end up sitting in 2 different data centers. All of these things start to stack up. And so you have increased network latency. It's getting better. It still isn't, I wouldn't use it for a real-time system still. You get storage delays, and then you have this really complex thing of, okay, where's my central database that handles all the logins and everything else? Is it talking to my local thing? Do I mirror it in the cloud center? Do I split it across? All those sorts of things make it a very complex build. And most of these cloud services, the cheap ones, give reliability guarantees. Yep, It'll be there, but maybe it won't. And, if you're trying to scale quickly or whatever else and you burn through what they have sitting around, I mean, nobody's sitting around with thousands of empty machines. You're going to get hit for it. So it's hard and expensive. What keeps you from doing it?
These companies can't really kind of afford to kind of hit that bottleneck, right? I mean, they've got to know that they've just got dedicated boxes. These are ours. We own them. We have this much power. We can actually, make computations and reports and analysis on how far this can scale and stuff like that based on, actual real hardware, not just things that
Security,
we can just,
too.
Yes. Oh, that's a big one. Yeah.
It's behind our firewall, our load balancer, our SSL box, all of those things that matter to them. You don't get that in the cloud. You'd have to fake it with virtual hardware, which, again, lots of concerns.
All right, next up, this one from Crodex says, does Turbine outsource any QA? What is the impact of outsourced QA on the industry?
So I will not say whether or not they do. I don't think they do, or I don't think they do a significant amount. But I don't know for sure. The outsourcing QA is interesting. So there's different things you're testing in QA, like Jay was talking about. One is looking at things like, does the code function, the smoke test, right? That you need somebody who kind of understands the game, and yes, the game's supposed to do this. Yes, you're supposed to be able to walk here. No, you shouldn't get stuck here, pathfinding, all that sort of stuff. That takes somebody who generally isn't outsourced. Is it fun? Is it playable? So, this sort of higher level of QA where they're going through and they're playing every quest and trying every option and all of that. Again, that's a hard thing to outsource because the folks outsourcing are just button clickers and they're not going to do a lot of that stuff. The automated QA that, you write scripts and other things to test your code, to do regression analysis, test it against older versions of some of your code. All of that sort of stuff you do in-house because those guys have to work with your engineering team. The only sort of segment of outsourced QA that I think is generally effective is device certification. And this in particular used to be a nightmare with cell phones because you had to certify on all the devices a carrier had. Even now, if you want to work with Android, there's a lot of complexity over, okay, I wrote this app, but here's a whole class of phones it won't work with. Here's a class of phones I'm not sure. These ones, the screen size is not quite right. Is it going to work on a tablet? Don't know. That you outsource to these companies, some guys like UTest and things like that they just buy all the hardware there is and they wire it up and, okay, you want to see if it runs on all this hardware? We'll run it on all this hardware and we'll feed it back to you. So that's stuff you can outsource. People used to outsource network issues. It's getting a little easier to do that in-house. So it used to be, here's my application. Now hit it with bad network conditions and tell me how it behaves. What happens to latency, what happens to the packet loss, is it still playable, all that sort of stuff. So those sort of technical, functional things, those are still things you can outsource. And actually PC developers, not just phones, but all sorts of different graphics boards, combinations of graphics boards and other things, different chipsets. They'll push those things out to third parties to do, but not core game QA.
All right, Tiff wants to know. Tiff says, I get the need to network to get a job, but how do I do it? As a student, what should I do when? Networking skills. This is a tough one.
This is so let's answer it in
First,
two
you
ways,
have to do one thing. You have to go to this place. It's called Outside. You have to go outside and you either see sun or moonlight.
The thing that freaks people out, and this is true, hell, it happens to me when I go to something new, is you go into an event. So, step one, you're going to events. You find local game events, you go to them. Now, when you go into one of these events, there's a whole bunch of people who know each other, and they're glad to see each other. They haven't seen them in a while, and they're talking about this and that. And then there's this group of people who don't know anybody and who are trying to look like they still belong. Oh, wait, I've got to check this important email. All of that stuff is hard. I know it. You know it. Never a lot of fun. I will say in events like that, two things. One is lines are your friend. You're lined up to get food, to get a drink, to get a name tag. Talk to the person in front of you, talk to the person behind you. They have nothing better to do. Focus on what you're saying to them. Hey, tell me what brings you here. Like, that's a nice open-ended question. You had something?
Oh no, I've watched some of the best people do it. Like and somebody's coming to mind, and he would literally just walk up to absolutely anyone at any party, any table, doing anything. It didn't matter, and he would just be like, "Hey, what's up? My name is so and so. What do you guys do?" That's it.
Yeah.
Like, that's all. It didn't matter who it was, and he would just go home with stacks and stacks of business cards and contacts, and that's how you do it. Just walk up to anybody. Hey, what do you guys do? What brings you here?
Right.
That's it. That's all you got to do.
Everybody likes to talk about themselves. What are you guys up to? What brings you here? Oh, that's interesting. Can you tell me more about blah, blah, blah? And at some point in time, they'll ask about you, at which point in time you say, hey, I'm a student. I'm really interested in this. You should always have a business card with you because there's a natural reflex, really, business people have. Somebody hands you a card, you hand them a card. You're just so used to doing it. You give a talk, you come off the stage, there's a cluster of people around you. A card moves forward, you take it, you hand them a card. You're just doing that. And so that's going to help you collect the cards. You follow up with the people that you met. You could send them a simple note the next day. The people you're particularly interested in, you follow up once a month, once every 2 months, either with something like, hey, I saw your company did something interesting. Gee, this big news in the industry is kind of exciting. I wonder how it impacts you. And you just keep doing that so they know you're alive and you're going to see them again. Because if you keep going to events, it'll take you 2-3 times before you know a few people and you start having a conversation. And a year later, you'll have a ton of people that you know, and then you'll be looking for the person by themselves. Now, in terms of timing for students, so I've been thinking a lot about this, because students, well, they're students. They miss this a lot. when you're a freshman, you should start. Okay? You start thinking about what are these events, who's there, who goes. Let me talk to some of the upperclassmen and find out what's going on there. Let me tag along with a couple of them to see what's happening. So you're getting a lay of the land. When you become a sophomore, you really have to be gunning for a summer job that's in the industry. If you're going to end up doing retail, your whole time in school, when you graduate, people are going to look at you and say, well, I know you can sell socks, but can you draw? You don't have any real experience. So your sophomore year is hardcore. You start that networking and you find yourself the people who are growing, people you have some rapport with, and you start doing things. If you're an artist, you start drawing things in their art style and you say, as a favor, would you ask one of your art director to take a look at what I drew? I'm trying to try different art styles. This is kind of like yours. 5 minutes, that's all I ask. Well, hey, you get introduced to the art director then. If you do good, the art director likes you, you got a shot at working your way in. So, you set yourself up there. When you get to your junior year, you've got a bit of a job behind you, you have some contacts, you kick it into high gear. So you are regularly touching all of the people who have a good shot of getting you somewhere. You're staying connected with them, you're tweeting, you're blogging, you're doing any other thing that gives you visible profile. Simply follow a bunch of the people that you've met on Twitter and tweet back at them. They say something, fire back a comment. That's great. That all of these things actually make you look like a person who's in the business rather than a student who's hoping someday to maybe get a job. Senior year, you get your resume fixed. Students do the worst resumes in the world. It's sad. Some of them send them to me, and I'll take them apart. If somebody wants that done, go ahead, send it to me. We'll use one as an example. But if you're doing a resume as a student, do not stick with the 2-page rule unless the job you're applying for specifically says keep it under 2 pages. We all have computers. We're all looking for detail. Give us more information. As a student, you might have only done a few things in the industry. Well, blow them up. Put in as much possible detail as you can of business relevant things. I looked at one kid's resume and he was a waiter in a bar. And it's like, okay, now your resume reads like you should get a job waiting in bars. This is what you've set yourself up for. What are you doing dealing with customer complaints? How are you handling cash? What are you doing with planning, scheduling? Any of those things that are actually business activities. Those are the things you begin to highlight. And then when somebody's looking at it, they go, oh, okay, he was a waiter, but at least he was doing things that have some relevance to business. Same thing in the games business. I looked at one for a student who was in our summer program. And you couldn't tell really what he did there. He had a nice title, but how challenging was it? How difficult was it? What were the specific things he really got into? What that does for the person who's reading the resume, and let me tell you, I've looked at hundreds, thousands of resumes. The first cut I always make is give me a reason not to look at this resume again. It's a quick scan, and do they have the basic things that we're looking for? Does anything jump out at me as being positive, or did they say something stupid? Like the one guy who said one of his favorite activities was going to loud car speaker events, and he had, won the award for Bleeding Ears '98. That's not going to impress me when I'm trying to hire a master's in public policy. If you did something remotely concerned with the field you're in, or if it shows responsibility, management, leadership, talk about that. You put in all that sort of detail because one of those things may catch my eye. And I say, oh, okay, yes, he's used Unity to do an online game. Interesting. Put that aside. This guy, there's nothing there distinguishing him. and the resume looks boring, it's not easy to read, the formatting's bad, that gets pitched. And it sounds harsh, but when you've got so many resumes, you're not going to take the time to analyze everyone. You do a big nasty cut, and you get rid of probably 2/3 of them. You look at the next bunch, and then you're looking for a reason to do a phone screen. So has this person told me enough that they're interesting? So if I'm hiring somebody straight out of college, I want to see that they did things related to their job, whether they did it as a volunteer, as an intern, as paid. I want to see that, they've attended a lot of events, they're active in, the local Unity users group, things like that. That would be interesting. That they've talked about their projects in enough detail so I have a sense of what that is and why that's interesting. All of those things matter. At that point, though, no one's looking at your online portfolio. They're just taking one more cut to say, which out of these am I going to start to look at? So, to really get this and to get a job, you want to have met all these people through those 3 years, have talked to them, and by the time you're going to apply for a job, you start in the fall of your senior year, you've got a decent resume, and you go to the 4 or 5 people you've built the best rapport with, and you say, hey, listen, I'm going to graduate this year. I know you guys may or may not be hiring, but I'd really appreciate it if you could point me in the right direction. Who's doing stuff like this? Who's interested in that? And you'll get, some people will say, hey, great, love to have you. You seem interesting. Others will say, look, we're not hiring right now, but I know so-and-so is, and I'll send you an intro letter. So when an intro comes to me from somebody in the industry saying, hey, here's a student who's decent, it's like, well, okay, I'm gonna take a look at this because I haven't had to do my shortlist the resume thing. So you put all that stuff together, and that's how you end up getting a job.
All right, last up, one more this week. Nick R. I'm curious on this one. It says, hi, Monty. With the recent news about the Elder Scrolls Online going with a subscription model, I thought I would ask you, why do you think World of Warcraft's subscription model has remained viable and dominant for so long when others simply can't grow with a sub fee? Do you think there's room for 2 sub-based MMOs? There's going to be more than that. There's a lot more than 2. I mean, WildStar's announced a sub. Elder Scrolls has announced a sub. I'm going to flip it around this question a little bit and just sort of say, what do you think of this recent, some of the recent AAA MMOs coming out and saying that they're going to have sub-based? You've been a big fan of free-to-play for a long time and saying it seems like the way to go, but a few of the larger games coming out in 2014 are going back to the old sub-based.
Well, I think when I look at it, there's a couple of challenges you have. So if you're a World of Warcraft player, they actually did some research on it. I think the guy was Edward Castronova at University of Chicago, where the study was when you have gone deep enough in an MMO, you start to treat your character and the things they have as a capital asset. So if you have, a legendary armor that's really, really rare and all matching, it kind of feels like you bought a small car. That's the mental satisfaction you get. So that sort of enabled WoW to keep with their subscription model and not get beat off by all these other people who've come in trying to take part of their market share. So WoW's held on to it, but I sent you that article a week or two ago. They're starting to make little cracks about, maybe we'll look at it. The numbers in WoW are declining. And the question, they have to ask themselves is, how many people are not playing WoW because they haven't wanted to pay for that first month or that second month, right? They know how far you need to play before you're going to get hooked. So what do? How do we change our game's metrics? Because we've sucked up everybody willing to pay us $15. So, I think WoW ends up thinking about it. You look at somebody like CCP. So EVE can be a subscription because there's really nothing else like it. It's a completely unique, the environment's different, the sandbox, the community. To be part of that, to be in this exclusive club, excuse me, you're willing to pay for that. when you've got an MMO that is a lot like MMOs that are already out there, and look, I'm going to put SWTOR into there, I'm going to put in Rift, all of these sorts of things, you're trying to compete against something that's established and people have, a lot of value associated with. And you have to find a way to get them to play your game long enough to create a sustaining community. And that's where free-to-play comes in that it's cheaper and easier to get them in. Now, lots of people, and I've met, probably more people who are developers who say, you know what, it's a value thing. If you build something good enough, if I build this, Steam targeted game good enough, people will give me $20. That's what I'm going for. I'm going for this value. And that's, to me, it's almost an ego statement, right? It's, I know the world is saying this, but I'm going to make this so good that somebody's going to give you this money. From a financial perspective, from a how are you going to make the most money the easiest, free-to-play looks pretty good, unless you've got a WoW or you've got Need, and most people don't. So what I expect to happen, I mean, Rift did this. They initially started as sub, and they weren't going to go free-to-play. They weren't going to go free-to-play. This was good enough, and they thought the Rifts would keep everybody engaged. And what happens? Well, the numbers don't stick the way you want them to. You think more people would like your game if they would try it. What do? You got to lower that barrier. You got to build in free-to-play. SWTOR, interesting game, but again, if I've got a level 80-something whatever in WoW, and I go back to being nothing, a Padawan, I got to play this for a while to get hooked into it. How are you going to get me hooked into it? Well, all the fanboys jumped on early on. Everybody else who's interested, but not willing to make that commitment, free-to-play comes along. So I think you'll see more and more of these guys end up going free-to-play, or they've ended up with something really unique, and it's not just our combat system's different, or we have a cool different IP. It's got to be something deeper than that.
Mr. Monty Sharma, you can follow him on Twitter at MONTSTER27, Montster27. And if you have questions for Monty, you can send them to Monty at Gamebreaker.tv. This is the show where he answers your questions. All these questions come in sent by you, the viewers. You guys got to send them in, send them in. Send us some questions. We love video questions. So if you guys have a video question, record yourself, post it up on YouTube, and email us the link. Keep it around like a minute or so. It's Monty at Gamebreaker.tv. You can follow me at Gary Gannon, follow Gamebreaker TV, Gamebreaker TV, and there's a bunch of new sites we got going on. We got XIV Nation now, freetoplay.tv, Cube Nation, EQ Next, all kinds of WildStar coming. So the network is growing. Have a great week. Thanks so much for watching, and get to making some games. Have a great week, Monty. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you, Gary.